Hi everybody, my name's Renza Shabilia. We're having a few technical difficulties right now, but I think I see that there are people joining us, so welcome. My name is Renza Shabilia and I am absolutely delighted to be here tonight on behalf of the wonderful team at My Life Diabetes Care, who are the distributors, of course, of the Ipsomed pump here in Australia. And tonight we're talking all about diabetes and exercise, which I am actually very excited about, but I know that lots of people think it's quite funny that I'm moderating this chat. But I'm joined by two absolute experts and guns who are going to share their experience and their knowledge, and of course, as always with these chats, they work really well because they're interactive. So please, if you've joined us, ask us lots of questions. So let's start with some introductions, and Nicole, I'm going to go to you first. Nicole Walker, could you introduce yourself for everybody, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Renza. I'm Nicole. I am a dietitian, predominantly worked in diabetes most of my career. As you can tell, I'm from New Zealand, and I trained and worked there for a few years, and then moved to the UK and worked in the UK with both sports and in diabetes fields. And I arrived in Australia about a year and a half ago. I'm based in Brisbane, and I work at a large diabetes centre here, and also in private practice for Macintyre Health. In my sporting history myself, I've done a bit of adventure racing, endurance sports, which I still enjoy, but not to a hugely competitive level. But that sort of helps bringing a bit of, I guess, practice from the field as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're also joined, I'm so excited to be joined by Monique Hanley. And again, I have to do this full disclosure. Monique and I have known each other for, I'm going to say, nearly 20 years. So we met when we were 5, and and she's a good mate. So I'm thrilled that she's here. And Monique, tell us about yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. Yeah, my name's Monique. I was diagnosed 3 days after Renza, so we share a D birthday every year. My background in sport, I was 19 when I was diagnosed. I was a basketballer, and it was very, uni student and everything. So things went, it didn't go so well for the first couple of years. It went well, but not so great. So I stepped away from basketball and needed to take up a different sport. And so that got me into cycling. So most of my sporting success and history is from cycling. So I was fortunate enough to race professionally in the US. And I started a little charity here in Australia called HypoActive to help people with type 1 diabetes be less afraid of exercise. Since that fairly active period of my life, I've slowed down significantly. I have 2 kids. I struggle to find time to exercise. I'm not going to stand up and show you my figure, but it's very well built for downhill cycling, not so much any other type.
Thank you, Monique. And I would just say that Monique always undersells things, including herself, and that little charity that she is talking about, HypoActive, is still going, is still active, and it became a sort of a roadmap for similar charities and organisations around the globe. So it wasn't something, I was going to say it wasn't something that you were running in your kitchen, but it kind of was something that you were running in your kitchen, but it has had very, very huge and long-lasting implications. So we're here to talk about diabetes and exercise. And for me, personally with type 1 diabetes who really isn't all that fond of exercise, one of the things that I personally find very frustrating is that we only ever hear from the elite athletes, really, when we're talking about exercise. So we hear about people like Monique and what she was doing when she was literally racing a bike across America. I want to be able to take my dog for a walk and not have a hypo. And that's where I'm really interested. So tonight we're going to talk about everything right across the whole spectrum, but probably really more focusing on that. How do we get ourselves, off the couch to actually be doing some things and do that safely and comfortably with type 1 or with any type of diabetes. Okay, we've got somebody from the UK who's just signed in and said hi. Hello, Zara. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so I want to start with a question for both of you that's actually, I think, a bit not part of one of the things that we chatted about, but let's start with finding the right thing for you. Why is that important? And I think that I just want to talk about this because I haven't found that right thing yet. So I'm hoping you can give me some tips on what that might be. But why is that important? So Nicole, could I start with you? Could you tell me why, how do we find that and what do we do to so that it's sustainable and we're still doing it next week?
I think be creative, and in terms of finding the right exercise for you. So I guess starting also something with friends too can be quite useful. And you don't have to necessarily do what everyone else does either. It doesn't have to be costly. It doesn't have to be inside. There can be many benefits to exercise, and especially depending on where you live. I guess I've heard just from these ladies that Melbourne is pretty cool at the moment, but perhaps then looking inside when we can post-COVID to things like a pool or the gym if that's your thing. But actually getting outside can be nice as well, or joining in a team, even doing some yoga or something at home. Best thing about exercise is that there is so much variety. It can be really social, and it can introduce you to a lot of people too.
Yep. Okay. And what would your tips around that be, Mon? As somebody who, you were playing basketball, this was your thing, and then you kind of changed. Like, how did you, and how do you find that thing that actually is something that you're happy to do?
Yeah, well, actually, that was so we're going back in ancient history now, but I do remember stepping away from basketball. It was just, I think, the difficulties of life. I grew up in the country, so I was living out of home and trying to manage this new condition and play elite basketball, and it was just all a bit too much. So I walked away from basketball and I stacked on the weight. There's a bit, I should learn from my past. But so I remember talking to my doctor about it and saying, whoa, I've blown out. And the doctor, I remember and the doctor probably would never remember saying this to me, but they said, look, you're just one of those people that has to exercise every day for the rest of your life. And that's a terrible line in many ways. But for me, it really hit home like, okay, if I have to do something every day, and I actually don't believe in that, but if I have to do something, what can I do that's sustainable? And cycling was it for me at the time. I didn't have a car. It was a way to get around, and it made me get out and about. Now, fast forward to now, because I got into cycling so much and I raced professionally and I had to get up every day and ride or train in some way. So I hate cycling for exercise now. I'll go out with my kids, but for me to go out on a training ride, I have no motivation whatsoever. So for me now, I have to find something that I really want to do. And that's a real struggle to find something. And so you'll find me at the school gate talking to other school mums going, hey, do you want to go for a walk sometime? So I'm always looking for opportunities. So I took up women's C grade cricket for a couple of seasons as a fill-in. Very, very bad, but loved being around other women, and it was just so much fun. Except when the fast bowler comes down and you're batting, that's very good for the adrenaline, great heart rate. So it's just finding something that you can do. So I guess my groove at the moment is swimming. So that's not great. But but I found the local pool was open last week. So I went down and I was just like, oh, where have you been? And I also, inspired by my mum, I thought getting a rower would be a great idea, but it's hard to find something that you do love, but just keep trying. Okay. I'm a constant failure do what I do.
No, I don't think you're a failure because you're still trying. It's not like you're not looking for that thing. So now I just wanted to point out that everybody, you can use the chat function, which is there's a little bar down the bottom and you can chat and say hi to us or ask us questions. Hi to Alicia, who has joined us, who has type 1 diabetes, and also we've got the Grumpy Pumper who has joined us from the UK, and he says he doesn't exercise but wants to know how to dig in the garden without having hypo. So I guess that's what we're talking about. Right, yeah.
Yes.
This is why I don't do any gardening, and also why I don't vacuum, because anything like that
It's a great excuse.
Hey, the health thing. All right, okay. So let's go back a little bit, Monique. You've sort of touched on this, but tell us about basketball, because I don't know much about that. And how did a diabetes diagnosis, how did that impact in terms of you actually playing basketball?
Well, I tried poorly to hide it. Oh, guys, this is a long time ago. I was, 19. I'm going, nothing's going to stop me. I'm going to keep going. So there were bags of lollies on the bench. I was on shots, so I had very little control in the minute details. I remember all these images come out. I remember being low at half time and my mum coming into the change rooms with a bottle of Diet Coke going,
Diet Coke, you said?
Diet Coke. Like, oh, no. Anyway, so it was very, I just remember the struggle because I felt like it was only me. I couldn't burden anyone else and I had to have it all sorted. And I didn't understand high intensity sports, the impact of adrenaline, the impact of nerves, the impact of a double header. So we would have a game on a Saturday night and then the game on the Sunday. And so being very high blood sugar readings on the Saturday night, and then Sunday couldn't get it up. It was always low. So these things no one was telling me why this was happening from a medical perspective. So I had to do all this really hard learning very fast on what to do in order for me to still hide it, I guess, from my coach and from the team. So yeah, it wasn't, looking back, it wasn't a great time. And I think that's why cycling was great. When I took up cycling, I had to learn how to cycle and learn how to manage my diabetes with cycling. So that meant, can I ride for half an hour? What happens to my blood sugar after half an hour? Okay.
Yep.
Right. Try an hour. What happens when I do it for an hour? Okay. So, and building up that knowledge that way.
Yep. So self-taught. So we've got somebody, Bron has joined us. Hi, Bron. It's good to see you here again. Okay. Now, I don't know if this is a typo or if this is a thing. She says that she's Zwifting. Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's a thing.
On the indoor trainer, listening to us exercising and learning, that's impressive multitasking. And someone tell me what Zwifting is, please.
It's an indoor cycling. So it's an online cycling. You hop on your indoor trainer and you can ride with other people. But yes,
or she can ride with us while we talk.
Yeah, we should have hooked ourselves up.
Awesome. All right. So Nicole, what do you hear and see from people with diabetes? So in clinic, what are the barriers that people face when it comes to exercising with diabetes? What are people telling you that what's their experiences, and how do those conversations go?
Yeah, well, I guess, firstly, there's the usual conversations about just getting started into something, as you were saying before. And I guess, diabetes with exercise is hard. It's more difficult than just putting your shoes on and going out the door. So I guess some of the big barriers are, and particularly when you do get started, blood glucose levels are more variable than if you're regularly exercising and if your body is used to a particular type of exercise. So unfortunately, at the beginning is when it's the hardest. And in particular, for most people, hypos would be the big barrier to getting started. And for most types of exercise, for most people, is that tends to be the problem is lower blood glucose. But there's many provisos in that. It's not always the case. And I guess with hypos being the most common, not only I think it's just building that toolbox in order to be able to manage the hypos and prevent them in the first place, ideally, because people come and they say, oh, look, I just gave up an exercise because I just feel like I have to eat in order to exercise. And what's the point in exercising, especially if it's for weight management or losing weight in particular?
Yeah.
And
That's one of the things that I hear
yeah,
from so many people is that they say,
yeah,
you know, I am I mean, there are so many benefits to exercise. I know that, but for a lot of people, a main reason that they do it is to lose weight, and they say, and having to eat, so it's cancelling the benefit out. So that's why the hypos really do need to be addressed. Yeah.
yeah, and also some people are quite fearful of exercise because of hypos, because not only are they, not only are they hypos, but they can be more severe, and they can, for people that usually have good awareness, all of a sudden they're just hypo and have no awareness when it comes to exercise. So they can be it can be scary, and it can be embarrassing, and all of those other things that go with hypos too.
Yep, absolutely. So what? So does that resonate, Monique? Because I remember having a conversation or hearing you say this years ago, where you said that for most people, like a really big barrier is people say, I don't have time. Like people without diabetes, I don't have time. I don't have time to exercise. But for people with diabetes, it's actually hypoglycemia. So what's your experience around that, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, totally. So if you look into barriers on why the general population don't exercise, it's lifestyle, it's lack of facilities, it's fear of personal safety. That's why I don't run at night. Those sort of barriers are very, they're the common barriers in the general population. But for us, we have all those barriers plus this overriding fear of hypos, fear of it going sour. And you ask any of us what our deep down fear is, and it's needing help from a hypo, or worse, So it's, we all carry that fear, and it's a huge barrier. So yeah, you need to. And that was one of the reasons why we set up HypoActive, was how can we work together to overcome these fears and build strategies to empower us, and as Nicole says, build a toolbox on managing. So yeah.
Fantastic. So we have a question. So Georgie Peters has joined us. Georgie actually, she's watching us. She spoke at our one of these a couple of weeks ago, where we were speaking about mental health, and she's got a question, but I'm just going to totally out her right here, because she just sent me a message saying, are you facilitating a talk on exercise? Have you been overcome, or have you been overtaken or something? So that gives you an idea of the people who I love in my life. This is, anyway, but she has a very valid question that I'm going to throw to the two of you. She says, do we have any recommendations to help the drop in blood glucose with medium to high impact cardio? Mon, you're nodding. Do you want to start?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Go for it.
There's a whole bunch of reasons why hypos are at risk with medium to high intense exercise. And so I actually built an acronym called VAMPIRE.
Yes.
Don't you know this? Don't you know
I remember this? Yes.
I might take notes.
So if you look at the guidelines for how to exercise, like Diabetes Australia, they say if your blood glucose is over 16 millimole, or in US terms 210 or something, I'm totally out of whack on that. 270, 290. So yeah, you shouldn't exercise, or if it's below a certain number, you shouldn't exercise. That's not very practical when you only have an hour in your day, when your kids are free to exercise, or it's just life is tough enough, and you've just got these periods of time to do your beloved exercise, or if it's not beloved, your mandatory pushing yourself, begrudging exercise. So they're not practical guidelines, and they don't reflect everything else that's going on. So a glucose number is always contextual. It's not just a point in time that means something, black or white. It is a passing point in time, and it has context around it. So one of the things is to understand what is going on in the lead up before exercise. So one thing, and oh my God, I'm off tangents anyway. So we with HypoActive, we had this event called the Murray to Moyne, and we would recruit type 1 diabetics and go on this crazy bike ride over a weekend. And it was year 3, I think, and someone crashed from a low blood sugar on their bike. And we realized recruiting people on the internet and not knowing much about how well they manage their diabetes is a bit of a risk for us. So we were like, how do we manage this risk? And so what we brought in was always getting people to test twice before they went out and did their cycle leg. It was a cycle relay.
This was before CGM. We need to say this was way before we had this information available on a phone, because we had CGM tracers, right? This was blood glucose monitoring.
Yes. Well, a lot of people still don't have CGM.
Yes, I know.
It's
I know.
very difficult to access.
Yes, absolutely.
So that was the first thing, was to work out that a spot measure is not practical. And with CGM today, those guidelines on exercise are not practical at all, because you have more details, hopefully. And yes, HypoActive still does it every year. And yeah, we've been going since 2003. It's crazy. Wow. Every year, bunch of type 1s on bikes. Crazy.
Well, Anya has just said HypoActive still participates in the Murray Des Moines relay event, and we still do our blood glucose levels, as Monique states. So that legacy, yeah. And just remind me, is it like, it's 500 and something kilometers, isn't it? For the week, 540 kilometers or something. So
yeah, in 24 hours. Yeah.
24 hours.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a big tangent. Exciting stuff. So that's one of the other. So that's a really important point, is knowing what your blood sugar is doing before you exercise and why it's doing that. Have you eaten? Have you not eaten? Have you still got residual insulin on board? All of those things, you need to understand what's going on. In terms of the intensity of the exercise, the other risk factors need to come into play, and you need to think about, have you done this exercise before? If you haven't, your muscles aren't used to that activity. So it's going to take more energy to operate your muscles doing that activity. So if first day playing cricket, my legs are good for pedaling, they're not so good swinging a bat. So I'm more susceptible to having a hypo just because of using muscles that I'm not using before. So that's another factor. So how attuned are you to this particular exercise? And then there's another sort of side factor, which is how fit you are. So if now, doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to have a big impact, because I'm not very fit at the moment. And so I can jump in the pool and expect to have a big impact on my glucose levels. I could take up archery and expect to have a big impact because of double whammy, not used to using those muscles, plus I'm not that fit. So there are other factors as well. And then the intensity of the actual activity. So as you probably know, when things are intense, your body releases adrenaline then triggers your liver to do a dump of glucose, and your blood sugar goes up. So there's two times that happens. It's also when you're really nervous. So if that activity that you're doing is the grand final and you're playing in front of grandma, and it's a really, really important event, and you have all these nerves, your blood sugar is going to go up because you've got all this adrenaline and all this anticipation. So you have all these factors to think about. So when you say, oh, what do you do for medium to high intensity exercise? It's not an easy answer, because it can't be. Yeah. So the thing is, and I'll get off my little high horse in a second. The key is to understand all of those factors and to work out how they apply to you personally. So we know these, and and Nicole's probably got all the research, and I'm hashing the research and interpreting my own little simple brain. But once you understand those factors and you think about the context in which you're exercising, then you can start making changes. So the gardening is a really, really good one. So who gardens all the time? Well, not me. So as soon as I pick up the hoe, the blood sugar starts dropping down. But you think about it, it's still activity. It's muscles you don't normally use. And it goes on for a lot longer than you anticipate. So the biggest thing with gardening is you underestimate how much physical exertion's involved. So grumpy pumper, that's why you go low. So that's, yes. There are risks, and that's what the vampire framework is, to get you to think about each of those risks and go, okay, that's why I'm a higher risk for gardening today.
Okay.
I'll put something in my pocket, you know, or whatever it is.
Yep.
Sorry, Renzo, I just hijacked that.
No. And
That's great.
we're going to come back to this in a minute because we've got some people asking about that. So wait a minute, we're going to come back. But what do you want to add to that, Nicole? And I just also want to say, if you know some of these things in advance, what sort of things can you be thinking about beyond the pop something in your pocket? What prep can you do beforehand? And then also, what can you do when you're thinking about recovery as well to minimise those impacts?
Yeah, that was a brilliant explanation, actually. I probably can't add anything to that itself, but in terms of preparation, I guess being prepared, one, it helps to also alleviate those fears in the first place and helps you to feel more prepared for exercise. I'd suggest having, firstly, a bit of a diabetes toolkit handy. So get together the things that you need when you're starting exercise. Prepare for hypos with taking a couple of, or having some treatments on you. Make sure that you've got a method of measuring your blood glucose levels. And I guess also, you know, take a friend or a phone, because if you need help, then you can have access to it. Or someone just to sort of remind you, you know, do you need to do a blood glucose check? It's been half an hour, or you've been going a while in the garden to bring you out a cup of tea and some biscuits midway through. Those support people can be quite useful as well.
Yep.
And I guess understanding a bit of like what Monique was explaining, that how your body responds to exercise and what it does for most people, but then also working out what it does for you for the different types of exercise. And from there, the tools that you've got in your tool belt, really the two of them consist of carbs and insulin. And the two ways that we can, and I'm talking sort of preventing a low blood glucose at the moment, but you can also do the opposite for a higher blood glucose type of exercise, like if you're doing stair sprints somewhere, or if you're doing one of those HIIT sessions at the gym where you know your blood glucose just soars as your liver does its thing, then thinking about what you can do ahead of time with your insulin, ideally, so that you don't feel like you're having to eat the carbs all the time to exercise. And that allows your muscles to be greedy and to use up that extra energy or the glucose. If you can reduce your insulin, then your muscles can take some of that, and hopefully keeping your blood glucose levels within a bit more of a nicer range during exercise. And so, like if you're on injections, then that could mean to start with just halving your insulin before and the meal before exercise if you're a bit worried, and then working your way back from there if it's too much. And then say for a pump, chucking on a temp basal for that period of time and having a bit of a lead in as well, because your insulin takes about 2 hours to peak. So you want to have a bit of a lead in period, and then it to be reduced during as well.
Yeah. So someone's actually just asked that. Thanks for your question, Shannon. What about timing of insulin in relation to exercise? So, I mean, I guess with everything, as everything with diabetes, it would be so wonderful if we had hard rules that worked all the time. We don't.
Yeah.
And of course, things will be different for everybody. But what sort of things, Nicole, if you could just share, and then maybe Mon, if you wouldn't mind, just some of the tips that you knew that worked for you as well. And of course, I will just say this here, I should have said it at the beginning, this isn't medical advice. Please don't do anything that either of these two people are saying for yourself. But do take it as a good guide, and then go and talk to your healthcare professional, because, you know, my diabetes is very different to everybody else's, and whoever you are out there, yours is very different to the next person. So this isn't medical advice. Don't start playing with doses and things. But just as a general and very general rule of thumb, Nicole, what can people think about?
Yeah, I'd just consider those two things, reducing your insulin for during, and also considering having carbs beforehand. And it can help just as a starting point to sort of have either percentages in mind, or have, I guess, a certain amount of portions in mind, that's my exercise carbs or exercise portions. Because then if it doesn't work, you can go back to the next trial and say, well, I need 2 of those, or I need less of a percentage of that. And it kind of gives you a bit of a rule of thumb for yourself. But yeah, as Monique very much pointed out, it's so I guess the guidelines so need to be adapted for everyone. And it helps to work alongside your healthcare professional, dietitian, doctor, to just nut out some of the things, or another friend with type 1 as well. Can be quite good. Yeah.
So, Monique, what worked for you? Somebody specifically asked about temporary basal rate. So I don't know, is that something that you perhaps can talk about in what was working and what worked for you? When did you start using a pump? Where were you in your exercise stages where you started using a pump?
I had done 2 Murray Des Moines with.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
It was actually well, with HypoActive, the second Murray Des Moines, there was a couple of people using pumps, and I was like, got to get me on that. So I was on a Medtronic for 3 years, and then an Omnipod, which is a Ipsomed product, but not available in Australia. I was on that for 11 years. I'm back onto shots now, but then, you know, I'm not performing, so who cares, right? But with so I was big fan of temp basal. I some of the athletes that we used to race with who also had type 1, we all had different preferences, little things. So one of my teammates would be like, just switch it off. He would have no insulin at all going in, whereas I was always of the opinion I need to have something going in. So I reduce it depending on the type of race or the event that we were doing, but I'd always have something a little bit going on. Some people would turn it off 2 hours before the event, but for me particularly, I did a lot of shorter racing. That was my bag. So it had more adrenaline, and I would usually spike early on in the race. So I found I would actually dial it back on the start line. So I wouldn't have any temp basal in the lead up. On the start line, I would, turn it down, and then because Omnipod, you still have it attached to you, and then I'd give it to the, handler or whatever they were called, to look after the rest of the pump function. Yep. Back on Medtronic, I would have, depending on the race, I would have switched it off completely. High intensity race, I would leave it right up to the start line, and then unhook and give it to someone, race. And then as soon as the race was done, I would put it back on, because in those times, I couldn't afford crashing and breaking my pump. So it was better to just live without it. So that meant I had more insulin on board than what you may have liked. So that also meant, but it also helped manage the start race peak. So you have this huge adrenaline when you start the race, and so your blood sugar would go high. So having the insulin on board right up to the start helped counter that. But then I was at risk of going south. So I learnt that about 30-40 minutes into the race, I needed to have high impact glucose, and I had to have it no matter what. So that was learning the hard way. And that's what worked for me. And then as soon as the race was done, sometimes my race, because of the adrenaline, I would still be high. And if I'd had that glucose, I'm not checking my numbers during the race, I'm just doing it on feel. So sometimes I would finish the race and be quite high. So it was really important, as soon as the race was done, get the insulin back in, check your levels, always have, and we would have a big hit of insulin and go straight into recovery mode. So, we're racing for performance. We're not racing for weight loss. The difference is we need to recover. So you hit the insulin, you get the insulin into your system, and then you hit the recovery drinks or the high glucose to counter that. And so that helped your body get into recovery mode quicker. And in some ways, if you look at the theory behind it, quicker than what a non-diabetic would, because we're artificially making that insulin kick in. So, performance gains. Okay. But the other thing with exercise that if there's one thing I want to impart today is don't think about it as weight loss. Think about it as fun and something that makes you feel good and makes your blood sugar levels just don't be as crazy afterwards. Like even if it's just walking, your blood sugars don't go as stupid. So exercise for groovy blood sugars, not for don't think about it for weight loss. And Nicole, you would know too that your best chance of weight loss is is food anyway. So
Yeah.
so exercise for the love. That's just and find the love.
And the benefit is that you get the benefit so quickly, like you can see it within the next day. So someone without diabetes, you know, they don't necessarily feel that benefit. So it can be quite a good fast feedback. Yeah.
So I want to ask, we've spoken a bit about preparing, but let's talk even now more about after. Anya says that she finds that she has to closely watch her blood glucose levels for 24 to 72 hours after a new or intense activity, because she often will hypo a day or more after the activity. So Nicole, what do we know about that? What can we do? And then I'm going to come back, Monique, and I want to talk to you about the broader benefits, and let's not focus on weight loss. Let's talk about the other benefits of exercising, but let's talk about what do we do for the next 24 to 72 hours?
Yeah, really important actually. So the reason why we have these hypos afterwards is that the muscles are still, they're still being greedy after exercise. They're greedy during, but they're also greedy afterwards because they're trying to replenish their stock of glucose. And so if you think about that, well, a good way to help with recovery is to, and this is for people that are exercising at an elite level, but also for people that are just going for, say, a walk or a run or a gym, is that it's good to time your meal afterwards or a snack after exercise, because it helps the muscles to, you know, it helps to fill them up, I guess, like a really hungry teenager, and fill them up early, and then they're gonna not trouble you for as long afterwards necessarily. So having ideally some carbohydrates, but it can be within your day's healthy diet. So I'm not talking having extra necessarily. I'm talking like timing your exercise so that you have your meal afterwards. And that can help to sort of fill them back up again. And then in terms of, once again, looking at your toolbox, so you've got carbs that can help with recovery, and you can also look at adjusting your insulin for that period afterwards. And we do know that you're more sensitive to your insulin for 24 to 48 to 72 if it's long exercise or new hours afterwards. And often people are a bit surprised by, you know, why did I have a hypo that night, but it was the first PT session they'd had that morning. So it can be quite a big difference in time and hard to associate.
Okay, so let's talk about why. Convince me. Why would I want to start? You've just all scared me. I'm reading stories about people hypoing. Someone's just said that they go for it. They have hypos multiple times when they exercise just by walking their little dog. I have little dogs, and I walk them at a park where I can just stand there and they run, so that I don't have safe, contained, off-leash park. Tell me why I should do it though. How am I going to feel? Monique, talk about the mental health benefits of exercise. Convince me.
Have you ever floated in a pool?
This is getting very, very deep.
It's the best. It's the best thing. I have mental health problems that I still live with, and I know it's really common in our community. And exercise, as the research, as the evidence shows, is really helpful for that. It's not only just getting out with other people, but just finding time. So there's exercise, and it not just one. There's all these different ways to do it. You know, riding with your kids is fun when they're not complaining. You know, there's all these different joys. But I think one thing is just giving yourself the chance to look at the world in a different way. And I saw someone recently, it might have been on Twitter, saying that they'd just taken up riding, and they'd lost their son 7 years ago, and they had started talking to their son while they were riding, and just having those opportunities that exercise affords you just to think about things in different ways and different perspectives. And for me, you know, one of the benefits, if there's a benefit of putting on a lot of weight, is that I now float in a pool, and I find that really amazing. And it's like, look at my new party trick, kids. Mum can float. And I love it. It's just the best thing, just floating and just not doing anything. And, you know, that's still using energy. So, you know, all props to me.
I just want to say that you saying you don't do exercise. I see you not like on social media, because unfortunately we live just a little bit too far away, where you've got a bike with 25 local kids in the front of it and you're riding them around. So I think you need to stop saying that you just don't do any exercise anymore.
Well, that's the other thing, because I don't see that as exercise, but I see that as fun. So I've got a big, it's like a wheelbarrow on the front of my bike. It's called a cargo bike, and it's not 25 kids, but I've got 6 kids in there before.
Yeah.
And look, don't see me on the uphills, but on the downhills, it's fun. That's the thing. I took the kids down the other day, actually down the street, and I said, okay, Mum will take one for the team. I'll take you down on the cargo bike. They're big enough to ride by themselves now, but there's something so much fun about that. So I don't see that as exercise. And that's the other cool thing, to find something that tricks you into exercising.
Yeah. Okay. Nicole, I have a question. So Philip has asked, we've got so many questions, and I just realised we have 4 minutes before this chat finishes. I can't believe we've been on here for so long already. But Philip has got a question saying that she loved doing yoga for a while, but now she has dodgy wrists and arms, and she's got some tendon issues, so it's really painful. And as we always hear, things are more common when it comes to diabetes. But do we know of, any ways to prevent those sort of things? And, what do we do when the thing that we really love we can't do anymore because we're injured or because diabetes has made it a little bit, more difficult for us? What are your ideas around that?
Yeah, I mean, that is really difficult. And I think a lot of people do experience injuries and barriers to doing what they love. In terms of that, like, I think it's important to firstly to make sure, I guess, you go and seek support if you can, because that people like physiotherapists, exercise physiologists, your doctors, going and actually seeking support really early. Like, if you've got something that's preventing you from doing the thing that you love that week, go and see someone and see if you can actually, and I guess work on it and improve, say, mobility and those things. Those professionals are out there. However, I mean, if it does get to the point where you can't do that one thing that you're after, perhaps there's another way of doing it. So, I mean, there's all these funky things around yoga. I'm not a big, I do a little, but not too big a yogi. But yeah, perhaps there's something you could do in the pool, aqua aerobics, that could be similar, or even, float. There you go. If you weren't sold, then I don't know. So finding something that's, I guess, similar, or just putting it out the door completely and saying, well, what can I do now? This is maybe an opportunity to try something new, and seeing if you find something else that you love.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to throw, I can't believe I'm doing this, but parting words of wisdom. Monique, what are your parting words of wisdom for people who are exercising or want to exercise? What's your philosophy about this sort of stuff? Just do it.
Well, if you can find someone to do it, if you can convince the school mums to come out with you, you're on a winner. Do something. Yeah, it is the holy grail, is to find something that you love, that you have time for, that you don't feel guilty about, that your husband doesn't go, oh, she goes again to a cricket. Or no, he doesn't do that, but you get it. So you need to find that, and that's really hard. Yeah, go off and find the holy grail, but that is the holy grail, and keep looking for it. You deserve your time to exercise. Fight for your time to exercise. You will love it, and it is so good for you. But don't think of it as a weight loss tool. Think of it as a good for you. My time, looking after my diabetes time. I'm doing this for me. Doing this for mum, kids. So do it for you. But get, don't beat yourself up if it all goes to there.
That's such. Nicole, what would you say to people?
I think my advice would be just to do it, just to go out there, and I guess whatever there is that's stopping you, that's the thing to work on. And when it comes to diabetes, just make sure you just equip yourself, and don't think, I think Monique actually mentioned it earlier, the point I want to make is, don't see it as trying and failing. The only failure is when you don't try, or if you stop. Really, it's trialing and trialing again and trialing again and just having another trial. So, and you'll just get to know yourself, and you'll get to know what works and what you enjoy. And I guess looking out there for inspiration as well. There's lots of people with type 1, Monique and others, that have achieved so many awesome things, just as anyone without type 1 diabetes. There's no difference, I guess, to what you can achieve. There's just, it's a bit harder to get there. So keep trialing.
I'd also add, if you're going to be dealing with health, when you're working with health professionals around this, is find a health professional like Nicole. I did literally not hear a judgmental word come out of your mouth. I love you. Thank you so much for that. Now,
I love you too.
Things, it's amazing. A couple of things. I feel like we're just scratching the surface with this, but people wanted to know what vampire stands for. Where can they find out more?
Oh, I do too.
Yeah, on. We haven't got time to write it up now, but
I can do a screen share.
No, we can't do that now.
Can't do that, no.
And this, I'll tell you what, we will share this with Tanya and Silver and the gorgeous team who put this together. And if they have everybody's contact details, they can email them out with it. Or if you find me, if you Google, this is a good thing about having a name like Renza, Google Renza, R-E-N-Z-A diabetes, you'll find me and email me, and I will be able to send it to you. But no, Tanya says sure can. Tanya can take care of it, even better. So we'll send that out. So that's that. But thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you so much, Monique. Thank you so much, everybody who's watching and asking lots of really great questions. I'm almost feeling like tomorrow morning I'm going to go for a walk or something. We've got another one of these chats in 2 weeks' time. And somebody who's been watching and contributing is the Grumpy Pumper, and he's going to be joining us next time. We're talking about my diabetes, my choice and choices in diabetes. Just to give you an idea, he just said something about, so he's in the UK, and something about hypoing while burning stuff in the garden. I don't know. We're not allowed to do that anymore in Australia. Bonfire in the garden. We don't burn things in our back gardens anymore. We're a little bit more developed than that, I think, these days. But Grumps is going to join us with Cheryl Steele, diabetes educator extraordinaire. That is going to be a fun chat, because they're quite possibly the cheekiest 2 people in diabetes, I reckon. So please pray for me. Okay, so thank you to everybody so much. This has been great. And we'll see you at the next one, 2 weeks. Okay, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Yeah.